All right, all the insulation has arrived to insulate the shop. Really looking forward to getting this up. It's gonna be awesome and it's gonna be cool, finally. Keep you updated. All right, so I'm about halfway done, with the exception of the back wall. And it's going pretty good. It's a little slow, but not too bad. So basically these are 5 foot wide bats that are going up along the walls, and the end pieces are 6 foot wide. And basically it's one roll. It starts from the floor, goes up and over, all the way over and down the other side of the wall. And so that kind of one continuous piece actually makes it, it's going to make it really easy to make sure the whole place is airtight. So it used to be that the air conditioner, which I've got mounted over here, would run pretty much non-stop and it would barely be able to keep the shop at 85 degrees, and now it's able to run intermittently and keep it at about 75. So it's getting better, but still have a decent amount of shop to go. Once all that's done though, should be very well insulated. So looking forward to it, and I'll keep you posted. All right, so getting pretty close to being done here. Only 2 real bats of insulation to put up. Kind of wanted to go over how I was really doing the banding, and then also kind of what I plan to do with the joist. So with the banding, right, it's this pipe hanger banding that's got a bunch of prefab holes in it, so it makes it really easy to just cut it to length and then screw it into the metal frame. So I'm using self-tapping sheet metal screws. Seems to work pretty good, and I've also been using pilot holes to make it a little easier. So basically I put all the banding up and then I shove the insulation in from one end up and over across all the banding to get it down to the other side. So it is pretty much one continuous piece of insulation all the way across. So I should actually have enough insulation to insulate the garage doors as well. So I think there'll probably be enough left over to be able to do that. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, so how I want to do the frame is basically there should also, kind of hoping that there's enough insulation that I can run that across the frame. So basically you cut a strip of it, I'll put it across this, and then we'll be able to secure it on either side, so that way the heat conduction through the frame is minimal. But then also, right, to finish the install, the tabs on the side of each roll of insulation, I'll be able to wrap that over and then also secure that. So there's some double-sided vinyl tape that I got to kind of assist with that. So once the whole frame is sealed out, like honestly the whole inside of the shop should be pretty much white at that point. Should only be insulation. You shouldn't really see any of the frame at that point. But it stays a lot cooler now. The sound dampening is actually really good. That was something I did not really think about when I was planning this project. Is the sound dampening is actually really good. So doing videos in here will be a lot easier in the future. But yeah, I'm able to keep this place pretty comfortable around about 75 degrees during the hottest parts of the day. So it's definitely a worthwhile investment. So, all right, well, I'll let you see how it is once it's over. All right, so we're getting pretty close to getting the last big pieces up. There's still gonna be some small pieces that need to go in, kind of under the air conditioner. You can see that, a couple of little sliver sections, but the vast majority of the shop has insulation now on it, and it is very nice in here now. Temperature's nice. The sound is like way better. There's basically no reverb in here anymore. But I kind of want to show you how I'm hanging these sections, because when I was doing these long sections here that go up and over with the rafters, it's all the same piece of insulation, so it's pretty easy to just drape the vertical sections down and it would kind of hold it all together. But for these vertical sections, it's a little more difficult since there's no piece really going into the overhead. So what I've done is I've cut the notches in the insulation so it can go around the banding and go up into the overhead, and then I've pre-taped sections of it with the paper still on the back for the second half, so that way once I pull it up there and I've got it on the ladder, all the tape is already there, and I can just peel this back paper piece off and stick the tape on. And the tape is actually pretty good tape, so it holds it up all by itself. And then once I finish that piece, then I'll take some of the extra. So that was actually a failed piece. The the insulation kind of separated from the facing, so I'll still use it for something else, but probably the garage doors. And then I actually have a whole nother roll of extra insulation, so we'll get the doors insulated, and then I also want to use the extra insulation to wrap around the vertical beams, and then if I can, if there's enough, to actually do it across the roof as well. So still a decent amount of work to be done, but getting pretty close. At least the bulk of it's done to where you can kind of enjoy it a little better. Alright, so actually been making really good progress in the shop. Got all the walls done up. So I still have to clean up the edges. As you look at the ceiling, you'll see the silver peeking out from the flaps on the edges of the insulation bats, and that's because I got to fold those over the actual frame of the shop, and I'm gonna wrap that in insulation, as I've kind of already talked about. So basically what the whole thing should look like is this, where behind this is the actual frame, and you can see it a little bit where it's screwed in here, and you know, there's insulation here, and then I've actually wrapped additional insulation over the frame itself, and then folded the flaps over and overlaid them and taped them down. So it should be one consistent piece of insulation basically across the whole thing once I'm done. But it stays mighty cool in here now, and it's really nice. So more work to go. One thing that I did do, I don't know if I mentioned before, but it was I insulated the garage doors as well. So basically I shoved it under the end of the frame here for each of the slats, and then ran one piece of the banding across the center just to hold it against the actual piece of the door, and then taped down the edges at a couple different spots. So hey, it works pretty good. It's way more insulated than just sheet metal, so I think this place will be tight as a button once I get it completely finished. So looking forward to it. Stick around and show you what it looks like when we're done. So one thing that actually I do want to bring up is so from purely like a heat transfer perspective, just because there's insulation here does not necessarily mean that that the exterior of the building is cool, or that there's no heat basically attempting to get in. And since that heat can't transfer to the inside of the shop, what basically ends up happening is it kind of builds up on the outside of the building, and because of that, there's a bigger temperature differential between the outside of the building and the inside of the building, or at least the inside of the building on the hot side of the insulation. And that bigger temperature differential kind of negates some of the effects of the insulation. The insulation still obviously does a lot, but I put a thermocouple on the sheet metal panels during the height of the day, and they get pretty hot. They're about 110, 120 degrees depending on how hot of a day it is. So there's a lot of heat being blocked by the insulation, and it's I mean, it's doing its job, but it's yeah, I don't know. This is just R13 insulation. The R19 insulation was about $1,000 more expensive, and so I figured it's going to take a pretty good amount of time for the difference between R13 and R19 to really pay off for that extra $1,000. So I went for the 4-inch insulation instead of the 6-inch R19 insulation. But we'll see how that pays out in the long run. It'll probably take years to really evaluate fully the ramifications of that decision. But all right, yeah, anyways, stick around, we'll have more. Well, it's done finally after a solid 6 weeks working a couple hours a day. It is done. So every square inch of the interior of this shop is covered in insulation, to include the garage doors. So I even have the metal frames, right, you can see under there that I've got the banding tied into, is covered in a layer of insulation. The panels on the garage doors are covered in insulation all the way up and around over the overhead down to the other wall. So for each of the cavities, I basically laid insulation over the banding to go up all the way around, so it's one piece that goes all the way around. So it's pretty good. The air conditioner is pumping out cold air, and it stays nice and cool in here. I've also put a filter for like a home air conditioning system on the front of the AC unit, so as it sucks in air while I'm running tools, it doesn't have too much dirt or debris get on the coils. And yeah, it all looks very, very nice. I have leftover insulation, so I have some kids' rooms that could use a little more insulation in the attic, so I'm gonna hike that up into my attic space here in the next couple of days. But all in all, the shop is ready for business. Couldn't be happier. Absolutely could not be happier. So I mentioned a little bit before, but the overhead on a sunny, hot day, the overhead's easily about 120 degrees, and so eventually what I'm going to have to do is put probably a solar-powered attic vent on the roof, and basically on a really hot day set it up so that way it circulates the air in the overhead with air from the outside. So if it's 100 degrees outside and it's 120 degrees in the overhead, you can circulate that air through, so it's only 100 degrees in the overhead, and that will allow it to stay cooler in the shop. So the radiant heat just kind of baking in the overhead it's stopped in large part by the insulation, but it would be better to circulate that air so it's a little cooler up there. So that'll be a project maybe for next summer, because summer's pretty much over now. But yeah, it's very nice in here. So, and actually on the subject of circulating air too, for the winter you can basically do the opposite. So when it's a sunny day out and the roof is generating heat from the radiated heat, if you put in a vent so that way you can vent down into the shop from the overhead, then you could pull some of that heat that's generated in the overhead and pump it into the shop instead of using the heater on the air conditioning unit. So I'll probably experiment with this a little bit over the next year to try and increase my efficiency, but right now it works just fine and it stays very comfortable. So couldn't be happier. But yeah, so what I'll do is I'll put a side-by-side of the before and after, so you can actually see what it was like before versus what it's like now, and it is night and day. It sounds better in here. There's way less reverberation. The lighting is better. I used to think that I was going to have to hang extra lights in the overhead. Now just the three major strips of lights is actually pretty much more than enough lighting for the entire shop. So it's pretty well lit at the moment. And yeah, really, every single shop should be done up like this. Couldn't be happier. Anyways, all right, well, if you have any comments, leave them in the comment section. Make sure you like the video, make sure you recommend it to your friends, and subscribe, and all the other social media requirements. But yeah, anyways, let me know what you think. Till next time. Oh, and one more thing that I noticed as I was putting up insulation. So this used to be a flat plate, so this was 3D printed in blue PLA, and the heat, so basically it was didn't really have a whole lot of weight on it, maybe about 2 pounds, and I had it suspended, basically attached to either end, and just the weight of that 2 pounds on it in the heat of this shop before it was insulated was enough to deform it over about a month's time. So yeah, shouldn't have that happen anymore. Kind of important to keep your shop from being 120 degrees in the middle of the day. That will definitely help.